welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. Sunderland are in search of their third manager in 2.5 seasons, if my mathematic is correct, following the departure of Parkinson. With an announcement expected before the weekend, it means Sunderland are likely to head into this week's game with probably one of Danny Cowley, Paul Cook, or perhaps even Lee Johnson in the hot seat. However, all that really matters is that Sunderland pick up a much-needed 3 points against currently the worst side in the league on paper. But to discuss if Wigan Athletic and Saturday's Will Grigg derby is going to upset the apple cart for us is Adam from Latics podcast, Progress with Unity. Before we get into how you might upset our Saturday, Adam, how are you doing? Are you all right?
I'm not bad, thanks. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're going through a really difficult time, been in administration since July. But yeah, just trying to get on with things, really, like everybody is at the moment. We're still a tier 3, so we won't be watching football anytime soon. So yeah, it's paying our £10 and watching our youngsters perform. That's really what we're doing at the moment.
I was going to say, you're in the north. Of course, you're in tier 3. You're only allowed out unless you're in London. I just believe at the minute. But I think with a lot of guests, we like to find out about what's going on with the club and all this kind of stuff. But I think with Wigan, it's a travesty what's going on at the moment. And there's a lot of interest from outside of Wigan and the situation, especially with what's happened with Macclesfield, with Bury. In short, what's currently happening with Wigan and the ownership, inverted commas, at the minute?
Yeah, so we've been in administration since 1st of July. Then Just to give you the edited highlights, administrators, Begbie trainers were appointed, had a look at the finances. We owed lots of football clubs money, football creditors. So we had, in inverted commas, a fire sale, pretty much sold off. 10 of our first team who played the last game against Fulham were sold off, and that was a side that was going places. Sold off way undervalued. Because you've no control in administration over the values of the players. And that just continued to happen over the summer. Paul Cook then left, which was expected. There was no way he was going to stay around, really. It was obviously going to be a very difficult situation for him. And he did a great job with what he, actually being put into administration. My dog's obviously getting very angry about Wigan's administration.
I can completely understand that. I was going to say the dog's not pleased about it.
Barking with passion in the background. But yeah, it's been sort of quite difficult really over the last we've got to obviously start the season, which we weren't sure about whether we would start the season. We didn't really know about whether that was going to be the case. We started the season. We had John Sheridan for a bit, but he was only ever a stopgap. And we've just been plodding along, really, with our youngsters. In terms of the ownership, it took ages to get. And then we kind of finally got to the point where a Spanish consortium, if you like, who were the preferred bidder. It sounded positive at first. It sounded like they've had some experience in the Spanish. But it's taken so long with the EFL at the moment that you now start to think to yourself, well, is this actually ever going to come to fruition? Why haven't they passed the tests yet? I mean, I want the EFL to do a good job with due diligence and everything, but we're currently at a stage where I think we must be getting to a point where the exclusivity with the Spanish is ending, and there are apparently others waiting in the background now that are becoming quite vocal, who look like better bets. They're more well known, at least. I'm not always saying it's better the devil you know, because I'm sure at Sunderland you've been burnt by that before. But from our perspective, I just don't see that there's a real positive future with the Spanish bid, because if they're struggling to find the proof of funding, then where's the investment going to be? Are we just going to be back in administration in 6 months' time? So really, at the moment, I think we were talking after your contribution to our podcast yesterday. We've got no manager, we've got no physio. We have got a very good academy manager, by the way. We've got obviously no chairman, very limited players, nothing left to sell really now. We sold our training ground to Preston. Our our main training base. We have still got one, but our main training base was sold to Preston, state of the art. We sold our chippy. We had a chippy that was formerly run by Wigan's old chairman, David Sharp. We've sold that as well. So literally, we've pretty much sold everything. So if we don't get out of this pretty soon, we're not going to have anything left to sell to keep us ticking over, really. And I mean, there might be a bailout. There should be a bailout from the Premier League for all those clubs. But if not, I can't see how we're going to pay wages. We've still got wages to pay. We've got bills to pay. So I'm sorry it can't be a bit more uplifting, but we are where we are really at the moment. And even with that, I think the dog's probably sick of me going through this with people now. I think he's getting frustrated as well. So that's probably why you heard him barking in the background.
No, that would make sense. And it's one of those things that's probably, in a way, it's not a good thing that's happened to Wigan, far from it, but it's nice that so many people have taken notice of it. It felt like Bury just appeared like 2 weeks before they kind of died, and people went, well, what the hell's happened here? People kind of seem to be in the know about Wigan and what's happening. But I think that Spanish consortium was about the beginning of October, wasn't it? So that'd be dragging on for nearly 2 months?
Yeah, exactly. 30th of September was when the administrators accepted the offer. There were loads of ones mooted. You'll know yourself when your club's up for sale. There's always people mooted that, you get some, don't you? Just want the attention. They want the 1 minute of fame, don't they? They just come out and they start going back to the old days of like Michael Knighton and Man United and going back years for those sort of things, really. So I think you always take it with a pinch of salt until they kind of put the deposit down. And when they put the deposit down, you were starting to think, well, the messages sounded okay, but as time has gone on, you start to worry some of the messages that they were going to use the supporters club money, or they asked to use the supporters club money as part of the purchase price. Well, we raised, with the help of former players, in fact, one of your former players, very generous, Callum McManaman, he put $5,000 into the cause. James McLean gave a good sizable donation as well.
Yeah, I read that actually. Yeah,
football fraternity all came together, and obviously Wigan fans, we put loads in. We were almost at the 900,000 mark. But the Spanish were seemingly wanting to use that as part of the purchase of the club, but to give the supporters very little say, really. I think they were kind of saying 4% stake. Well, I'm not a mathematical genius, but if the club's worth 4 million and you're putting in 900,000, it's worth more than 4%.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm not that great at maths either, but I'm sure that equates to closer to 25, if my maths serves me right.
No, that to me is a... No, I'm wondering whether they needed that to move things on quickly, and what's delaying it is they're trying to get alternative monies in. The Football League are not going to want to have monies that are mortgaged against other things. They don't want proof of funding in terms of, do they actually have the money, or are they having to borrow the money? Because if they're having to borrow it, then that's another situation where it's dangerous. It's a bit like the Bury situation. It's like the previous Wigan situation and all the other clubs. You're just selling it from one bad owner to another. If they're constantly having to borrow money against things, then you start to worry, don't you? Where's the sort of liquidity in it? And so I don't mind that the EFL are due diligent on it, but I do think the administrators need to allow others to come into play at some point soon, because if they don't, we're just going to, even if we survive, there's not going to be anything left. I think I'm going to be playing centre half at this rate.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that was going to be my next question is, unfortunately, a lot of the time with football, you're speaking about things that aren't actually what's going on the pitch, especially over the past year. But, COVID's a different situation at finances, I guess. But on the pitch, it's not going well. Currently bottom of the league. But weirdly, you've had 2 wins, Doncaster away and Portsmouth away, which is two of the better sides, I think, in the league currently.
Doncaster was at home, but it was still a good win. But Portsmouth away was their first home defeat in 18 months, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously got beat 3-1 off Portsmouth this season, and I think they're the best side we've come up against. But how difficult has Wigan's season been then? Because those 2 results indicate a bit of positivity, but you're bottom of the league, you don't have many players. Like, is it difficult to watch?
Well, what happened was obviously we had to bring up quite a lot of players in at short notice. we had a few decent players left from last season. So we had 4 or 5 of our team squad from last year who were decent championship level players. We then added a few kind of players who'd been coming back from long-term injuries at other clubs, players maybe who hadn't quite made it, with the free transfers, a couple of decent loan signings, and 2 or 3 young players. And that's how we were starting the season. So it took 2 or 3 games to gel. But then we started really playing some decent stuff. I thought Portsmouth, we were good value for our win. Doncaster, bit of a nervy game, but we won that one. And then, unfortunately, the game after that, we lost 2 players. So we lost Otterbar, who was really good at this level, very good attacking left-sided player. He went down. We lost 2 centre-backs. We then lost the next game. We lost Cal Naismith, who's probably our best player at the moment. We lost Lee Evans to injury.
Not the comedian, right?
No.
I didn't think things got that bad.
Yeah. Then we lost Will Keane, who we'd only brought in on a short-term deal. He got injured as well. So what happened was essentially we'd gone from 2 or 3 of our more experienced under 23 players sort of propping up the squad a little bit and playing bits and pieces of football to within the space of 2 weeks, pretty much 8 or 9. And not just under 23s, we're talking 2 or 3 players who were actually in the under 18s last year. Now, a very talented under 18 side that got knocked out of the quarterfinals of the FA Cup and beat Tottenham along the way. But even so, having all those in at the same time, really talented players, but just crying out for experience, really. So it's not surprised me at all, really, because it's typical of a young team. They play good football. They knock it around nicely. They tend to have control in games, and then they make 2 or 3 silly mistakes, and they don't have that clinical edge to them. And in the last 2 weeks, we've lost our top scorer, Joe Garner, who looks like he's going over to India. Just simply because what can you do? If you've got a player it's about the security, isn't it? Ultimately, players at this level are not multi-million pound players like at the Premier League level, so they need to look after themselves. So you don't blame any player for leaving. So I think we've been very, very unlucky that we've lost all those players to injury. But clearly, if you lose 6 or 7 to injury, you can still put some experienced players in. We were basically, as soon as we lost them, it was almost a ticking time bomb, really. As soon as we lost 1 or 2, there was too much reliance on young players, and I just don't think that League One's tough. We've got some really good seasoned pros. You were talking about one yourself on letting Ledbetter. I mean, he'll be playing against probably 2 young lads on Saturday in midfield. Now, they're good players, but will him and Power just have too much nous for them in that midfield? That's the issue, because it's not looking like Evans is going to be back in midfield on Saturday.
How many injuries do you have in total that are likely to miss out on Saturday?
In terms of first team, is probably at the moment about 5 or 6 players in an already stretched squad. We had one kid, Naismith came back last night, but we'll have to see how he is. It's his first 90 minutes in 6 weeks, I think. So hopefully he'll be okay. But yeah, you'll notice there'll be about 4 or 5 young lads. You look at the faces and you think, can they really be playing professional football? But it is what it is, really. So I'm not getting any excuses in. I think administration is clearly an excuse in itself, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not.
We're not getting battered. We're not getting battered though either. We're losing games by the odd goal, and we're well in games. It's just when they're that tight, it's where you have that bit of know-how, don't you? And you've got those players who can get you over the line. And as I said, I don't think we've got that at the moment, unfortunately.
In terms of, you touched before about the manager situation, I did want to come on to Paul Cook just on the off chance that he is one of the people that is appointed. But before I talk about our manager, we don't have a manager we expect to have one in. But what's happening with Wigan's managers at the moment? Sheridan's gone. He was left.
Yeah, Sheridan's gone. At the start of the season, Liam Richardson, who was Paul Cook's assistant and very good coach, well regarded through football. I don't think he initially wanted to step up, but I think early on in the season, there was a lot of recruitment going on as well, and obviously integrating new players. I think what will happen this time, in my view, now it's a bit more settled at the moment. Obviously, January will be interesting to see. Hopefully, we've got owners by then. So I think for the next sort of 6 weeks or so, he can just concentrate on managing coaching. The head of the academy is kind of coming as an assistant or an advisor. Gregory Rioch, son of Bruce Rioch. He's done a great job with the academy. So him and the under-18s manager from last season, a guy called Peter Murphy, they're doing the first team jobs. So there's 3 of them really. So it works quite well in that respect, because obviously Gregor and Peter know the young players very well. And obviously Liam's got that more level of experience, but not as a front man. So I think he will make mistakes in things like his substitutes and that type of stuff. But I think he's a coach that will improve young players day in, day out. So he's picking the team, he's making the key decisions, he's now doing the interviews. And a lot of people were saying that Sheridan was just kind of there because he had some good contacts for his years in the game to maybe bring the odd player in here and there, but also to front up to the press, really, to keep, from what I gather, Richardson was still doing most of the day-to-day stuff. And pretty much taking the lead on picking the team. And it pretty much showed that Sheridan wasn't really invested. As soon as a full-time job came up at Swindon, he was off. And you don't blame him again. He was only on a month-to-month contract. I've no problem with him whatsoever. Some fans didn't really like him, saying he wasn't invested in the project. But why would you be if you're on a month-to-month contract?
It's difficult to be invested when it comes down to, I think, your future.
Quite pragmatic about football now, really. I just realise that ultimately for most, it's just a job. Ultimately, you can't be thinking about... I mean, if people kiss the badge, it's usually fake anyway, isn't it? Most of the time, because next week they'll be kissing someone else's badge.
I think Darren Bent might know exactly what you're talking about if you're listening, Darren.
I think Mido was the one that did it for us. We signed Mido on loan from Middlesbrough. He scored a penalty and kissed the Wigan badge on his debut.
In terms of Paul Cook, I did want to come on to it. I don't think, from what I've been told, that he's likely to get the job at Sunderland, but it's not completely out the realm of possibility. It still could quite easily happen because he's obviously, I would imagine, have been interviewed, I would think. What are the pros and cons of Paul Cook, and do you think he'd be a good appointment for Sunderland?
I think he'd be excellent. I'd go as far to say, talking to someone who today actually very close to the club, and I think I'm at the same view. If you appoint Paul Cook, I think you'll get promoted this season. Simple as that. I just think he just knows what to do at this level. He'll get Will Grigg and Max Power going again, who are superb players at League One if they're playing to the right style. You've got some good players on paper, and I think Paul Cook can blend them together. He's good with good players, and he's also good at improving lesser players and getting them working for the team. So, we had Nick Powell, who was he's a bit of an enigma, but he got the best out of Nick Powell. Probably since his Crew days, Paul Cook's got the best out of Nick Powell. So, players like that you've got, he could get the best out of, but he'll also get you solid. He'll get the team working for each other. He'll probably maybe bring in a few possible former Wigan players, or even you might Raiders again if he did go there. So I think cons sometimes, I guess he does go through spells where he has a sticky spell. He didn't do it so much at League One, so maybe he wouldn't have one of those, but he certainly had them in the Championship at times. And at the moment, you can't afford one, because if you have one more sticky spell, you can't really get promoted this year, can you? Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, someone has to hit the ground with him.
It's hit the ground running. But he's very experienced at that level. He's obviously took Wigan up with 98 points, record number of clean sheets that season. Obviously, Will Grigg scored over 20 odd goals for him that season. That was the year as well where we beat Man City, when they were arguably the best team in the world at the time. I've got nothing but praise for him, really. And you'd be clutching at straws to find, in my view, a weakness with him, really. I mean, he might not be the sexiest name in the Sunderland, but when you look at the managers that you have had over the years, well, he's a damn sight better than the last two that you've had, I guarantee that. And I know that's from a very low base, but I'm amazed he's not back in football. Now, it might be, after all the upheaval of what happened and the stress levels, that he potentially might be taking a little bit of a sabbatical himself, because he's been non-stop managing really for 15 years. So maybe it's his little break from the game and he doesn't necessarily have to take, because Sunderland would be a bigger pressure job than Wigan was. He had his allegiance to Wigan because he played for us in the 80s as well. And he comes a nice guy, Scouser. He goes and stands on the terraces watching Liverpool. He just resonates well with most of the Wigan fans. Some he lost a bit last season when we hadn't won away in a year, which tests the patience of many. But I think generally people behind him. He goes to Sunderland. He's pretty much, like you said, hit the ground running. How much time would you give him? That's the thing. If he loses 5 in a row, if he goes 7 away games without a win, is he going to get that chance that he gets at Wigan, or is it going to be, sorry, we're going to have to try someone else? And that, I guess that's a decision that he has to make, because he's not really had a failure on his CV yet. So he might be thinking, is it better to pick wait and maybe, because there'll be a championship job going somewhere, and if he's going to roll the dice and take a risk, a pressurised job, why don't you try it the next level up? Because you're only one step from the Prem there, and you might think, do I want all that pressure in League One? Because and the other thing I would like to say about him as well is that a lot of people, when they were getting on his back, said, oh, it's such an easy job to get out of League One. Well, it's not. Sunderland, Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest, Leeds, Southampton, that's 5 I can think of who didn't get up straight away.
Yeah. Ipswich is another. Yeah.
Ipswich, didn't get up straight away. So if you look at the another one who might be linked with you, because he's way down the betting though, about 33-1, Gary Caldwell. But he has another 87 points straight up first season. Wigan's last 3 goals in this division before this season, we finished top on 100 points, top on 88 points, and top on 98. I don't think we're going to do that this year, are we?
No, yeah. Well, if you are, you're quite far behind, I think, and you're going to need to catch up. So suppose if we're discussing Paul Cook and what he could do with Sunderland, it would be really wrong of me, whether Paul Cook comes or not, to not discuss Will Grigg. It's not worked for Will Grigg at Sunderland at all. But I heard something the other day. Obviously, the big thing with Paul Cook is, could he get Will Grigg firing, and will he play Max Power higher up? Is there something that he could do that would fix that? I don't know. I don't know what he did to get Wigan firing, pretty much. But or Will Grigg and Wigan firing, should I say? But what do you make of the whole Will Grigg situation in general?
I didn't get it at the time. I got it from a Wigan perspective, because I actually think it was a superb deal, and I think Sunderland till I die, I think highlights kind of, unfortunately from Sunderland, didn't come out of that very well. It kind of said, we're not going any higher than 300 grand, which I thought was a disgrace. I mean, that was an embarrassing bid to start with. But to actually go as far as, I know it probably didn't end up being, it's not going to end up being anywhere near 4 million, is it? Because of the lack of add-ons, but even so, it's still a decent amount of money for that level, isn't it?
I think it's 3. I think it was 4 million if we got to the Premier League, which was probably not going to happen anytime soon, if I'm honest with you. But
10 times originally what he wanted to play. And I think with Will Grigg is you kind of have to have the components in your team to be able to play to his strength. So he struggled bizarrely in his first season at Wigan. He got 27 goals. He only had 5 before Christmas. And then we signed Yannick Wilshere as a speedy left winger. And honestly, it was like he'd get the ball, get to the byline, and it was almost like the ball was glued to Will Grigg. Everywhere Wiltshire put it, Grigg was there, just putting it in. And from that, he then started scoring, different goals as well. He scored a couple of cracking heading goals, and then the following season in the Championship, he got injured early on, and we struggled anyway that season. Really, really poor. Back down to League One, relatively slow start again. We had other players that were pushing him and getting in ahead of him sometimes, and then he hit the ground running around about November, December. Scored, was the top scorer in the FA Cup that season as well. So he's odd because he seems to always come into his own at later in the season. So I think you've got to play to his strengths. He's not. I don't know really what style you are playing because obviously I don't follow it closely enough. But it could be he's just completely gone. But it seems odd that he went from playing relatively well at Wigan to nothing. He's not done anything at Sunderland, has he? Really, he's not even.
No, not even
had 2 or 3 game spell, has he? Where he's like flat to deceive. And he doesn't. The way he came across, he did quite a lot of podcast interviews for us. He doesn't come across as someone who would be awkward. But I saw a picture of him. I can't remember what game it was, but he was one of the subs, and I just looked at his sort of mannerisms. His head was down. He just looked like he'd almost given up. In a sense, he just, for whatever reason, he just doesn't seem like he's happy. And I guess the problem, I don't know if have you had a try to offload him yet, or?
I think there's been a couple of clubs interested in him, but I think that the problem you've got is he's probably on a fair wedge. And I think the weird thing with Will Grigg is, like last night, for example, he came on and you were like, oh, Will Grigg, and he got in on the end of this header, did everything right and hit the post. And it's like, that's the thing with Will Grigg. If he's clean through on goal, the goal will move out of the way for him, or the goal will shrink, or he'll hit the post, or something will happen. Because in pre-season, he was scoring and he looked quite sharp, and people are going, well, hang on a minute, maybe that's the case. But in a way, for everything I've said about Will Grigg, if we're talking about former Wigan players at Sunderland, you could say similar to Max Power. Max Power's kind of flattered to deceive him. He scored last night and he's a little bit more, Mike. But I wanted to ask a little bit about Max Power as well. We see Max Power as a holding midfielder 9 times out of 10. And we keep getting told that he was not really a holding midfielder at Wigan. Are we playing both players just completely wrong?
Max Power is, for me, but he's clearly better than this because it's a disservice to a professional footballer, but he is the professional footballer headless chicken for me, in a sense that he's full of energy, breaks stuff down. I think you said yesterday he's in the mould of Steven Gerrard in that type of thing, but clearly nowhere near as good because he
thinks he's Steven Gerrard. I think,
yes. Yeah, and he does like trying the sort of passes, and the problem with him is I don't know if he's the same at Sunderland, but at Wigan he wanted to take everything, corners, free kicks. Again, very Gerrard-like, very confident player, comes across confident, but I don't know whether that's some sort of to disguise. Maybe he is at times quite shy, in the background, and he tries to overcompensate with it. Playmaker, I'm not really sure. I don't think you'd have him as a playmaker. Is he a holding midfielder? Probably not either. He played in a 3, I think, quite a lot at Wigan. So you can have that sort of energy running around the pitch and breaking things up, winning the ball, using it relatively well. His touch is decent as well, so he's accomplished. But if he's in a 2, you need someone alongside him who really will not almost move. Otherwise, you're just going to get done in the centre of the park, really. I don't know, are you a 2 or a 3 midfield usually?
Oh, since he's been here, he's done a few, but it's funny as you were speaking there. I think the best I've ever seen Max Power play was probably, in my opinion, the second the second leg away to Portsmouth in the playoffs, which we played more of a flat three. At the minute, we play like your anchor man with Ledbetter, and you'll have sort of Power and, I don't know, someone next to him. It's been Scowen most recently, but he often sits almost like he sits in a two, and you'll have like maybe Scowen more advanced, which is also a bit weird because I'm pretty certain Scowen was bought as a defensive midfielder. But I think there's a thought process in the Sunderland fan base, I think, and I don't speak for everyone here, but that Max Power and Will Grigg haven't worked at Sunderland because we play them incorrect. Like, we play Max Power too deep. We don't play Will Grigg's strengths. Like, because Max Power went more advanced in the last 20 minutes yesterday and scored. But for me, Max Power is just a typical League One inconsistent player that, if he played to the level he's capable of, would be probably above this level. And that's what frustrates me most about Max Power. But yeah,
does he know his level himself as well? Because that was very interesting, wasn't it? The fact that, I mean, he came up the first time with Wigan. We signed him when we were rebuilding in League One, and he came in and he was fans took to him straight away, because when you've got a new team, you want someone who's running around, don't you? You're putting the effort in, and he chipped in with a couple of goals as well. When he scores, he tends to score good ones as well, usually.
He does, yeah, I'll give him that. He scores some absolute screamers. When he does score them, he does score good goals, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, but what happened, we then went up to the Championship, we made a mess of it. We sacked our manager, got Warren Joyce in from Man United youth team, which was just a disaster. And I don't think Power was even playing then. And then we went back down to League One, and I think for a moment he thought he was better than what he was. He put a transfer request in. Paul Cook froze him out completely. Didn't get his move, and then fitted in really well that season. We had Lee Evans, who I mentioned before, but he went back from his loan spell. So the second half of the season, Max Power came in and he was superb. But again, alongside a very good player in Sam Morty, and Nick Powell was just ahead of him. And so he didn't have to be the main playmaker. He didn't have to be the defensive linchpin. He could just do what he wanted, really. Run around, put lead tackles in, and do that sort of stuff, which I think he's good at, really. I mean, if you was going to say anything about Gerrard as a weakness, that sometimes he would leave his position. It wasn't necessarily always I'll stick to a position, textbook central midfielder, I guess, like Roy Keane or someone like that. But Gerrard he brought all the other stuff with it, didn't he? That clearly Max Power doesn't
yeah.
have.
If he had like maybe 5% of the Steven Gerrard, I'd maybe let him off. But the fact I don't think he has any percent is probably my issue. But I feel like I'm harsh on Max sometimes. I don't hate him that much.
No, and he's a good. I think he's a good lad. I mean,
he seems a good lad.
There's iconic pictures of him at the end of this. We beat Doncaster on the last day to win the title, and he's holding a flare at the end of the game. It's just like, that some fan had thrown a flare and he stood there with the flare, and everyone's like gathering around him because, Will Grigg scored. We waited to the 78th minute. Nick Powell plays the pass through. Will Grigg's on goal. The fans were ready to cheer because they knew Will Grigg's putting that in the net. You're the complete opposite at the moment. He's running through on goal, and you're thinking he's no chance of scoring.
It'll be the last person I'd want to see clean through on goal, and not because I think he could leave Sunderland and do absolutely fine. I honestly think that, because you can see something somewhere. I don't know what, but you can see something. But I just don't trust that it's ever going to happen for him.
It would have happened, but is it a graveyard now unfortunately for Sunderland? Is it a graveyard for good strikers? Because Charlie White's not really done it, has he, as you'd expect?
Been his best season so far this season. He scored 5, and we're in December, so I think that.
I mean, he was superb. I remember him coming to Wigan for Bradford. In fact, they've gone since he's left. They have gone completely. I mean, they're in danger of going out of the Football League at the moment. Bradford, the way they're playing, they've just completely gone. But he was superb for them. They were well up there with Wigan early on in the season. We won the title with Blackburn. They were top 3, and then they just kind of went completely.
Probably got something to do with, like you're saying, with White. It probably got to do with the fact he's came to Sunderland. We do seem to have a knack of destroying strikers. I just wish I knew why. One thing I sort of did want to ask just on Wigan as well is, I haven't had a chance to watch Wigan, and I'll be honest, I looked through the squad and Carl Naismith aside, I was kind of struggling to pick a player that I really knew the ins and outs of. Obviously, Carl Naismith used to be at Rangers when he was young. Seen him a few times when he was there, but that's just because of where I live. So when it comes to teams that are coming up on Saturday, you kind of tend to know what style of play it's going to be. But how are you likely to set up on Saturday? Do you think you'll sit back and try and get a point, a bit like Burton did last night? Or are because the players are young and fresh, are they just kind of just going at teams and just going with it and seeing what happens?
We're not good enough to sit back, I think, for a point, to be honest. I think I'm not saying we'll go all gung-ho. We'll play a relatively conservative starting lineup, but if there's an opportunity for us to attack, the fullbacks will. Now, the fullbacks, we've got Tom Pearce, who came through at Leeds. He's a good player. He'll get forward, and if he gets space, he can put a good cross in. And on the right, we've got Tom James, who's on loan from Hibs, I think. So I don't know whether you've come across him in Scotland or not, but presumably because we've got him on loan, he probably hasn't been a regular at Hibs recently.
No.
So we've got two young central midfield players. I don't think Evans will make it, and it's a bit confusing because we've got Merry and Perry in midfield. Commentators nightmare. And also we've got Tom Pearce on the left and Tom James on the right. So it can get a bit confusing with that. So yeah, probably a young midfield. Naismith will play just behind the striker. I think what he's trying to do is get a bit of experience through the centre if he can. So we've got Curtis Tilt, who's come in. I've forgotten who he's on loan from now.
Rotherham, I think, because we were after him, I think, yeah.
Yeah, we've got that many loan players that you forget where they've come from.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's. I mean, you always know who your players are, and where they're from. But when there's so many coming at the same time, you can't remember which ones are on loan and which ones you've got on short deal.
Yeah,
you probably know your own. I don't think you will really know any of the players really. Let's see. No, well, there might be some, I suppose, I'm trying to think who's injured who you might know, but no, not really. No, Garner was probably quite well known. I don't know if you remember, because he scored goals at this level quite a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think he scored last time he came to the stadium, actually against for Ipswich. And obviously he spent a little bit of time at Rangers as well.
Yeah, we had that bit of a bit of a Rangers connection. Obviously, Naismith, Windass was down, but it didn't work out. Didn't work out at all for Windass at Wigan. But he was. But I don't know what. I never watched him at Rangers, but by all accounts, he did okay at Rangers. He probably thinks he did better than what he is, knowing Windass. But and then we had the few who went the other way as well. Obviously, Tavernier and. What was his name?
Keenan went as well.
Yeah, Rob Keenan and Martin
Waghorn. Yeah.
So there's a bit of a Wigan Rangers link. So it was when we went up there. Unfortunately, I was on holiday. Typical that I missed that game. I would have loved to have watched that when Wigan went up to Rangers, and I think that's when Naismith made his debut. He'll be the only player left, I think, from that day. We were talking 3 years ago or whenever it was. So yeah, I mean. I'd be interested to see what you think of some of the young players. Look out for Joseph up front. He's only played 4 or 5 games, but he scored 26 goals, 27 goals, I think, at the academy level last year. He's not scored yet, but he looks good. He glides around. He's got that pace as well. And I think if he gets a goal, he might score a few. But, obviously he's coming up against experienced centre-backs, so he's learning on the job, really. But
yeah,
interesting to see what you think of him. And then, as I said, the midfield too, the nice academy players, they're quite tidy. But sometimes they'll do things in areas where you don't want them to do it. Or Merry, in particular, he loves to tackle. But sometimes he's all gung-ho with it and he'll go and he'll be out to the game. He's just out in the mid. So don't be surprised if you have spells where you see really your midfield players running into acres of space because Mary's on his arse somewhere up the pitch. Well, he brings stuff on. I'm not getting critical about anyone who puts the Wigan shirt on this year for me is a legend because the difficulty of the situation. the players who are coming in on loan, albeit they're doing it for their own reasons to try and kickstart their careers, but even so, it's a difficult situation, and they're all putting it in. It's just, unfortunately, as you well know, if you don't have continuity, then you've got to have real quality, and we don't have either at the moment.
Yeah.
We don't have real quality to carry us through, and we don't have that continuity that, if you've got a good team spirit, a team that's been together for a while. Let's use Wigan for an example. You might not be in any way, shape, or form individually of the calibre of Ipswich and Sunderland and Portsmouth, but Wigan showed that you can do it if you've got a constant team, a team spirit, a good manager. Fortunately, with Wigan, we haven't got that at the moment. There's no manager. The players, we've still not named the same team yet. And we're now, if you include cup games, about 18 games into the season, 19 games, not played an unchanged team. I think we've only we've had, somebody said we've had 13 different centre-back pairings, which is pretty impressive, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not even mad, I'm impressed, to quote Anchorman. It's like...
So I think the other constant in the league games has been the goalkeeper. He's the most experienced player, Jamie Jones, who's played quite a lot of League One football, played a few in the Championship for Wigan as well. So he's all right. He's all right at this level, but he can throw a bleeper in. So sure, Will Grigg will be saying that, because he'll know him. He'll just say, test him early on, see if he puts a bleeper in. But yeah, they're all trying for the shirt, and there's no way you can say there's any prima donnas in the Wigan team who are not putting it in. They're just trying the best to make careers for themselves, really, and they've got to be applauded for it, whatever happens this season. And hopefully whatever happens doesn't kill them off, because they're good players, and whatever club they're at, they make good careers for themselves. Because unfortunately, some players can go wrong direction if you just keep losing every week, especially when you're used to winning.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. Last but not least, then, I have to always come to the standard question, and I've been making my prediction first every week, and we haven't won since I've done it, so I'm going to come to you first. Prediction for Saturday, scoreline.
Yeah, well, I'll have to give you the same prediction that I gave on my podcast, because otherwise it looks like I'm just playing to the Sunderland audience. So rather bizarrely, I went for a 2-1 Wigan win, and I've just based that on the fact that 2 days ago there's a guy who always puts Wigan Athletic memories on, and the memory was the 2-1 Wigan win that ended Steve Bruce's managerial reign at Sunderland with an absolute howler from the keeper in the last. We should have been 7-0 down at half time.
Franco De Santo, if I believe correctly.
Yeah. And so I thought, on the basis of that 2-1, when we were bottom of the league at the time, I thought, let's see if 9 years on history can repeat itself or we get another 2-1 win. So there's no logical rationale behind it, but I'll take a 2-1 win.
And I think I've got to go with the same as what I did on yours. I think I said a draw. I said 0-0 or 1-1. I'm going to say 0-0.
I'll take that though. I'll take it definitely. If you give me that now, I'll have it. I'll have a 0-0.
I think if it was a 0-0 or it was a 1-1 and there was fans allowed in the stadium, I don't think there'd be much left of it afterwards. So it's probably a good thing that if the result isn't a good one on Saturday, there's no fans allowed.
Were you on a manager by then?
We hope so. Yeah. Well, we think so.
Manager bounce, isn't it? I know they can't do much tactically, but sometimes you know what it's like. I mean, we were on a great FA Cup run, quarterfinals. Southampton were absolutely terrible, and then 3 days before the Wigan game, they sacked the manager, appointed Mark Hughes, and all of a sudden put in a stellar performance and beat us 2-0. We were on for an FA Cup semi-final as a League One club, so it can happen, can't it? If you
can, and maybe you never know with a new manager and fans in the ground, it might make a difference. I think I was saying before to yourself. That the fact that maybe there isn't any fans is maybe not a benefit to him, because when you get a new manager and you always kind of have go there, but you never know. But Adam, thanks so much for coming on and chatting Wigan. I know it's not the easiest thing to do at the minute, as it is for me with Sunderland, but significantly harder for yourself, I think. But I appreciate it, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Best of luck for the season after Saturday.
Same to you, mate.